There are some stories that just won't quit. And no, I don't mean that one your old aunt repeats every single holiday. I'm talking about classic tales that have been told over and over again for hundreds of years. Some are scary, some are mysterious, and some are tragic, but they all have one thing in common. We keep on telling them. So why are these stories so fascinating? Here to help you decide why these stories click and stick is your VJ Derek, our main man on myths and monsters.
Hey, I'm Derek, and yes, I'm your man for the next 4 videos. Now first up, I'm going to show you a story that goes way, way, way back, as far back as the ancient Greeks. Now those Greeks had a god for everything, and a lot of great stories about them. Even one about a teenage boy begging his dad for the keys to the car. Okay, so there were no cars in ancient Greece, but the gods had some really, really cool chariots. And when a boy named Phaethon took his dad's chariot for a spin, he needed more than a seatbelt to save him. Unlike Phaethon, do you know your limits? Can rules ever be a good thing? Hang on, it's about to be a wild, wild ride. Ah!
Phaeton's Wild Ride.
Phaeton was just a human boy, a mortal like all the other kids. But he knew there was something that made him special. His father was Phoebus, the god of the sun, who drove the fiery chariot that brought daylight to the world. He bragged to his friends that one day he would prove it by driving his father's chariot across the sky. But his friends just laughed at him. In truth, Phaeton had never known his father, so he went to the sun god's palace to meet him. Phoebus in his shimmering crown was more amazing than Phaeton had even imagined.
Wow!
Talk to me, son.
I need you to prove that you're my father. Would you do that for me, please?
Phoebus loved his son and said he would grant him any wish. But Phaeton wanted only one thing.
Father,
to drive his father's chariot across the sky.
Please, Father, just once.
Phoebus knew it was just too dangerous. Only a powerful god could handle the chariot that turned night into day.
I'll give you anything but that.
But Phaeton begged his father, and by the time a new day was about to begin, Phoebus gave in. The gates of dawn opened, and the sun god's horses were ready to ride. Phaeton was so excited he barely listened to his father's warning as he leaped into the chariot and led the horses into the sky.
Hold the reins with all your might. If you fly too high, the earth will freeze. If you fly too low, the earth will burn.
On Earth, the kids looked up and saw their friend at the reins. They cheered, but a moment later, they gasped. Phaeton couldn't hold the reins, and the horses veered from their path. They soared too high, into the constellations of stars, just missing the sting of the scorpion, thundering toward the bull, racing past the crab, his claws almost piercing the chariot. Just as the earth was starting to freeze, the chariot plunged down too low. Mountains exploded from the heat. Rivers dried up. The world caught on fire. Phaeton couldn't breathe or see, but he heard Mother Earth crying for help from Zeus, the most powerful of the gods.
Zeus, save me!
Zeus knew he had to stop the boy in order to save the earth, so the great god of Olympus cast a thunderbolt at the chariot. Phaeton was thrown from the chariot and plummeted to earth, leaving only a trail of smoke as he disappeared into a river. Phoebus was so overcome with grief, he never wanted to ride the chariot again. But he knew that only he could bring daylight to the world. So, with a broken heart, he took the reins and drove across the sky, knowing that no mortal would ever drive the chariot again.
He's a fire breather, a tail beater, a man eater, a hunka burning monster. Huh? You know I'm talking about dragons, because they pop up in myths and legends across time. why do we enjoy monsters like these? We've all seen dragons in pictures and in books and movies. And of course, they're totally made up, right? Let's see.
Dragon tales.
Take the body of a snake, the scales of a lizard, a bat's wings, an eagle's claws, the head of a crocodile, some dangerously bad breath, and what have you got? A dragon. Now, the reason this creature looks so unreal is because it isn't real. But stories of this totally made-up monster have been producing thrills and chills down through the ages. In ancient Egypt, dragons showed up in burial tombs to guard the dead on their way to the next life. The Aztecs of Mexico believed a dragon-like figure created human life, so they put dragons on their temples. And in China, the dragon has been a symbol of power and good luck for thousands of years. But why did the same mythical creature show up in the stories and tales of all these different places? One explanation is the fear factor. Who isn't afraid of snakes, crocodiles, and fire? Put them all together and you get dragons. Then there's the dinosaur theory. When ancient people first dug up those big dino bones, they couldn't imagine what kind of creature this was. So they made up tales about dragons. You can see the resemblance, can't you? And speaking of resemblance, dragons might just be larger versions of real-life reptiles. The giant Komodo lizard, also known as the Komodo dragon, is probably the closest thing there is. And while this bad boy may not breathe fire, that drool will kill you. Yuck. We'll probably never know the full story behind dragons, but one thing's for sure, they're likely to remain a very hot topic.
Let's say one day a mysterious stranger appeared in your neighborhood. Let's say she was beautiful and had some weird magic powers. Now, would you want to hang out with her or run away from her in fear? Well, I guess that depends on how beautiful and how weird. But anyway, that's the story behind an old Mexican legend about a mythical girl who changed one village forever with her baffling behavior. How do we decide what is normal and what is different? Have you ever had a hard time accepting someone who was different? Has anyone ever had a hard time accepting you? Let's take a look at the legend of Lucia.
The Legend of Lucia.
Once upon a time, a beautiful girl named Lucia came to a small village in Mexico. She was quiet and dignified and walked with a loyal iguana by her side. Butterflies and flowers trailed Lucia wherever she went, but the most amazing thing about her was that she seemed to shine, even brighter than the sun. The villagers all agreed they had never seen anyone like her. They were in awe of Lucia and a little afraid. But the river that flowed through the village fell in love with her right away. When Lucia bathed in it, the waters rose up to meet her and flowed through her shining hair. Afterwards, she'd comb it, and all the water and the fishes and the otters would flow out of her hair and back into the river. Lucia's powers frightened some of the villagers, and they began to avoid her. Some whispered that Lucia was going to hurt them. They called her names and treated her cruelly. Finally, they drove her from the village. Lucia went back to say goodbye to the river and bathe in it one last time. But when she tried to comb the water and the fishes and the otters from her hair, they wouldn't leave. They went with her when she left the village, leaving behind a dry, winding riverbed. Where once there had been green trees and cool breezes and birds singing, everything was dry and lifeless. No rain fell for weeks, and a great drought brought despair to the villagers. It was only then that they understood just how much the river loved Lucia and how much they needed its water. And they knew they had to bring Lucia back. After days of searching, they finally found her taking refuge in a cave with her iguana. They begged Lucia to bring the river back to the village.
I will do as you ask if you promise to treat everyone with kindness, no matter how different they seem to you, just as the river gives water to all who are thirsty.
Everyone agreed, and Lucia returned to the riverbed and began to comb her hair. This time, the water, the fishes, and the otters flowed out, and the river was full again. The people jumped into the river with joy. They were so happy to have the water back, they didn't even notice that Lucia had gone again. But she really hadn't left them. Her spirit would always be there to help them live with love and compassion in their hearts.
It's alive! It's alive! I've created a Frankenstein monster. Okay, maybe I'm missing a few body parts, but you get the idea because just about everybody knows the Frankenstein story. But do we really understand the cost and the benefits of science? People have been paying very good money to get scared out of their wits by watching the story of one scientist's creepy experiment in the movies. But you can see it right here, and it won't cost you an arm and a leg.
Frankenstein lives.
He's ugly. He's angry. And he's unstoppable. The Frankenstein monster has made it into movies, TV shows, comic books, and, really large heads? But who dreamt up the world's most famous freak? Turns out the original Frankenstein story actually was based on a dream. On a dark and stormy night, way back in 1816, a teenage girl named Mary Shelley had a vivid nightmare about a mad scientist who digs up the dead, stitches together body parts, and works night and day to breathe life into his creepy creation, until finally, he comes alive. That was one weird dream, but it wasn't something she ate.
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Mary lived in a time when some of the first machines were invented, and people were afraid their new creations might get out of control and turn on them. Mary knew she was onto something. So she wrote her dream down and turned it into a book. She called her story Frankenstein, after the name she gave to the monster's maker. The book was a blockbuster, and young Mary became a superstar. Okay, fast forward 100 years. Hollywood discovers Mary's monster and makes him a movie star, creating the famous face we all know and love. Those bolts are a nice touch, don't you think? Over 50 other Frankenstein movies followed the first. Old Bolthead even got a movie wife and some movie buddies to hang with. So it looks like this is one mean monster that is never going away.
There's a curse on our village. The curse of Frankenstein.
He just keeps coming back. Like a bad dream.
Hey, you conquered this monster topic, and that's no myth. We're done here.